So folks, thanks so much for joining us online today. So I'm Annmarie O'Kane with the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation, and you might already know that the centre is based in Armagh and we are a cross-border think tank. And much of what we do is all about collaboration on a cross-border basis. I manage the centre's Border People project, and that provides cross-border information to people who live, work, study, retire across the border. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Anne Devlin. Anne has two hats today. You have ASRI and the All Island Social Security Network. Are you there, Anne? Do you want to say hello?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Will I just introduce us now, Annmarie?
Absolutely, go for it.
Thank you. And I'd just like to reiterate what Annmarie said. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming online. So I am an economist at the Economic and Social Research Institute and also a steering group member on the All Island Social Security Network. So really just the All Island Social Security Network was formed about 2 years ago now, really just a network to bring together researchers just looking at what social security could look like in the island of Ireland in the future. So bringing researchers together from academia as well as civil society, just to examine, understand, and just try to increase discussion and debate in this area about the social security system in north, south, and sort of on a cross-border basis. It's worth mentioning the network is not taking sort of any position on constitutional issues, but really just trying to create a space for discussion. We're currently trying to build our membership, so we really want to engage with a wide variety of people with knowledge or experience of the social security system in either jurisdiction. So after the event, Annmarie is going to circulate, all being well, an email with details of some of the next things the centre's doing, as well as a link to the network's website where you can sign up to be a member. And then we're trying to work on a quarterly newsletter at the minute. So really just keeping people engaged in this space in the loop. So as Annmarie said, we worked together last year on the All Island Labour Market Study, which is going to talk a bit more about. And within the network, we've been talking for some while about having a webinar and bringing people who are dealing with these issues across the island together to chat it through and really see what's going on. But unfortunately, it kept getting pushed down my to-do list. So when Annmarie mentioned hosting these webinars, we were delighted, and we are sort of piggybacking off all Anne-Marie's hard work. But really, there's a lot of synergies here in terms of the social security implications for cross-border workers and just the issues that the network are interested in. And we really just want to see more discussion in terms of research, but also on the ground. So I'm delighted that we can sort of join up and do this today, and really looking forward to everybody's discussion after.
That's brilliant, and thanks a million. So you mentioned the study that we worked on together there. So that is I'll just move on a slide now, if this will let me. Oh, so the study was commissioned by the Labour, Employer and Economic Forum, so we call that LEEF, and the Shared Island Working Group, and it examines the current conditions of the labour market here on the island of Ireland, the challenges and the opportunities. It's a real assessment of what it means to live, to work, to employ people across the border here, the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. So it captures an awful lot of information. It's quite an in-depth document, but we thought this is a good opportunity to really highlight the issues that we know, and we went looking to see if there were issues that weren't on our radar. So there is a lot of information within it. So first of all, of course, we had to look at what type of mobility are we talking about between the two jurisdictions, and we didn't have to look very far to find a staggering amount of movement between the jurisdictions. Millions of car journeys and bus journeys. From the data available, we found 25,000 people working and studying across the border, 18,000 of those individuals just working across the border. But these are from some official sources that maybe aren't designed to really find those individuals. So we expect this to be much of an underestimate, if you like. But whatever the actual figure is, we know that there are thousands of individuals who are juggling the two systems. They're juggling two tax systems, two social security systems, and it is not straightforward for them.
Huh? Is this your laptop?
Somebody's unmuted and says there, if you could just, that's perfect. Thanks a million. So yes, so there's thousands of individuals who are juggling two systems, and it really is not straightforward. So these individuals often called a frontier worker or a cross-border worker. So the official definition of them would be if you're working in one jurisdiction and you are living in another and you return home daily or at least once a week, you count as a frontier worker. And this is typically the definition that you'll find in the EU rules and regulations and other regulations. But we have, I suppose that's our standardised kind of assessment whenever somebody approaches in the centre. Try and mute that person. Super. So in most cases, those individuals then they're going to pay their tax and their social insurance in the jurisdiction of employment, and they'll do that through their employer's PAYE system. They're going to declare their cross-border income. Hopefully they will declare it at home, and they'll do that annually by self-assessment. And then usually they're linked to the social security system in the jurisdiction of employment. So they will pay into one system, and that system will pay out whenever they need support. Usually the coordination rules also include something to do with healthcare at home and at work on the same basis as their colleagues. So that is generally the gist of the definition and the main areas that we would be thinking about when we think of cross-border workers. So with those individuals in mind and thinking of the all-island labour market, the LEEF study looked at quite a wide range of areas. Personal taxation and pensions. Usually a frontier worker that gets in touch with our project, it's usually questions about tax, and they haven't even thought of all of the other things. So we would tend to point that out to them. So tax, pensions, social welfare, qualifications, skills, the mobility of workers across the border. So think Brexit now and the need for visas and all of that. So the legal movement of individuals across the border. The changing world of work was also considered, and that's roughly remote working and flexible opportunities for working. And then also we had a look at collective bargaining and trade union coverage. Now, they're all separate issues and each of the chapters stands on its own merit. However, one worker could have an issue across each one of these topics. So it's all interlinked. So whenever we think and we discuss maybe about looking for a local solution, something that could be tailored for this place, we have to be really, really careful that a solution in one of these areas could have an unintended consequence in another area. And immediately what comes to mind is some of the conversations that have been had around tax and social security. So we need to have a holistic approach. And that's kind of why we were quite more than happy to do this report, because it brings all of the issues together under one heading. So across all of these topics, what we found was two overarching challenges: divergent rights and divergent legislation and policy between the jurisdictions, and also information failure across all of the topics. Those two issues came out loud and strong, and we had a lot of interaction and engagement with businesses and with workers, and for support agencies and advice sector workers and specialist services like financial services, employment law specialists, all of them engaged with the research and with our project down over the years. And these are the two main things that have come out loud and strong. So when we think about divergent legislation, of course, we have to think immediately to Brexit, don't we? So I'm keeping in mind that today we're going to think only about, try to concentrate only on social security coordination. The divergence there can appear somewhat complicated. In the majority of cases, there's 3 coordination rules that apply here. And the coordination rules are really important because they establish which jurisdiction is responsible for that individual. So we have to be able to link a person, link a worker to one of these sets of rules, and it can be quite difficult. Of course, it isn't difficult if it's your job, if you're trained, but most cross-border workers aren't trained in these areas. And unfortunately, most advice sector workers aren't trained either. So we're kind of working in the dark a little bit. So just over the next couple of slides, we'll have we'll just touch so lightly on those 3 coordination rules. So first of all, we have the EU and the UK withdrawal agreement. So the withdrawal agreement continues to link pre-Brexit workers to the EU regulations 883. So prior to Brexit, and an individual came to our project, we would have immediately went straight to the EU rules and regulations. So for anyone who held, who had their cross-border job, or they were in self-employment, and that predates the 1st of January 2021, and their situation remains unchanged, they have held that worker status, or in certain circumstances they've had retained status, the old rules as we knew them then, that continues to apply. So of course this group will get smaller and smaller. as people retire, as they break that status. Maybe they take a job where they live and where they work, and they're no longer a cross-border worker. Once that's been broken, you can't go back. Okay, so an example of this would be an Italian living south, working north since 2009. That individual will be able to continue to export UK family benefits to Ireland under EU Regulation 883. Very straightforward for that individual. So the next set of rules then is the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. So this is the new Brexit rules, and this is post-Brexit cross-border workers. So this is anyone who took up their cross-border job from the 1st of January 2021 onwards. So this set of coordination rules under the agreement is very, very similar to 883, but there are a few things missing. Family benefits are missing, exporting unemployment benefit is missing, and also invalidity pensions benefits. They can't be exported either, so there is a difference. And just to kind of have a look at that other example, if we change it ever so slightly, so that Italian who's living south, working north, but they started their job last year, so that's after Brexit, they can no longer claim UK family benefits. Full stop. So that's the difference. Now, that individual will also need a visa to work in Northern Ireland or any part of the UK, but that's another webinar. So we're going to just keep focusing on social security. So that's broadly who's within scope then of the EU and UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, mindful that we're just looking at social security. So the third option we have here then is the Common Travel Area. So the Social Security Convention that was agreed, I think it was signed in 2019. I stand to be corrected. So that focuses on the rights and entitlements of British and Irish citizens in each other's jurisdictions. And this agreement, this convention, follows very, very closely 883. It doesn't mention any healthcare entitlements for frontier workers. That's another part of the Common Travel Area, and we need to have another look at that on another day. But mostly it does follow 883. So, for example, an Irish person who's living south, working in the north since last year, will be able to export UK family benefits to Ireland under the Social Security Convention under the CTA. So you can see there that an Italian person and an Irish person are going to be treated differently now whenever they present to the project. And I can see a typo in the next sentence. We have to say, though, at this point, there's always an extra something to the cross-border bit. Whenever you find any red flag that indicates there could be a cross-border element, you always have to look further. Because although the Common Travel Area is really about Irish and British citizens, Ireland also extends some of that scope to EU citizens. Because of that EU membership, it can't treat UK citizens any better than its EU citizens. So it will extend the scope. But that is as an individual country. The UK doesn't extend that out. So, so there's always that little extra. So I suppose for the advisors that are on the call at the moment, what we're looking at here is trying to identify when the individual started their cross-border job and what nationality they are. They are two key pieces of information that are now needed. Before Brexit, the Border People Project, all we really needed to know that as an EU citizen, we knew where to look. We went straight to 883 and the rules and regulations were there for that individual. They're complicated enough. They weren't all sweet and everything perfect there. We had to kind of struggle to find some of the answers within 883, but now we have to have a little bit more information about the individual in front of us and then try and figure out which of the three set of rules are most likely going to apply to them. All right, so if you want more information about that extension that Ireland extends to the CTA, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Gotardo or something along those lines, judgment. And if you have a look in the LEEF study, you'll be able to get a link to that exact case and have more information about why Ireland does that. So just moving on then. So that's individuals who are cross-border workers. Now, that does seem straightforward, but we also have patterns of work that has changed in recent times. So frequently, whenever I first started working with the centre in 2009, the majority of people that got in touch with the project commuted full-time across the border. And That's quite straightforward. It's quite easy to identify which jurisdiction is responsible or competent for them. Usually, if they are commuting, it will be the jurisdiction where the employer is based. Now, in these more changed times, a lot of people are remote working full-time. And if they are carrying out all of their duties in the jurisdiction where they live, then the competent state switches to where they live. So full-time commuting, it's the place where the employer is based. Full-time remote working, it's the place where the person lives. So that's actually quite straightforward. What's becoming more and more complex, though, is the hybrid patterns. So a few days of the week here in the office maybe, and a few days a week at home. Who's responsible? And it's not just as straightforward as you'd like it to be. There is one start-off rule to have a look at, but there are always the exceptions, so we always need more information. But in general, we would say to a person, if you're working at home less than 25% of your time, it will remain the jurisdiction where your employer is based. Okay, so that's quite straightforward. Less than 25% of the time, the employer's jurisdiction. For any more time than that, for 25% or more, the jurisdiction responsible for that worker will switch to the place where they live. Okay, so this, you can see now how this starts to get muddled up. So not only are there different rules at play, the pattern of their work is also really, really important to understand. Transparency in all of this is really important. It's very important for the individual to declare all of their situation, but mistakes can happen at application time, and it can also happen at processing. And it's always really helpful whenever whatever rules that have been applied to a person, whenever they go to apply for Social Security support, whatever rules have been applied to their decision, if they're mentioned in the decision letter, that is really, really helpful to the advisor who is supporting that individual, perhaps with an appeal, if you like. I'm not 100% sure about how often the exact rules are mentioned in the decision letters, but maybe we can open that up to discussion later on in the non-recorded part of this. But transparency is absolutely vital, because you can see all the moving parts here. We have to kind of put them together and make sure the right rules are being applied to the right person. So that's the competent state. So bearing in mind that that 25% rule is maybe doesn't suit the more modern way of working. And in response to that growing trend, some neighbouring EU countries have amended existing bilateral agreements, or they've introduced entirely new agreements that attempt to kind of keep pace or catch up with labour market trends. And there's just one mentioned there in this slide. So the Czech Republic has made agreements with its neighbours in Germany and Austria, and they've increased the threshold from 25% up to 40%, which is fantastic. And then the EU also has an opt-in framework, and that extends to almost 50%, so 49.99 before the jurisdiction, the threshold changes. So Ireland did opt in to that framework. They opted in almost a year ago. So the 1st of June last year, 2024. Unfortunately, the UK hasn't opted in, so it doesn't apply here. So that would mean that an Irish employer could maybe have more favourable terms for remote working for somebody who's flying in from France, for example, or somewhere further afield. But anyway, if somebody is living in Dundalk and working in Uri, we're still looking at the 25% rule. Okay, so we need a local solution too, and the Common Travel Area might provide that tool for us to figure out what to do. We've also got the Good Friday Agreement structures. They focus on north-south and east-west matters that are of mutual concern and of interest. So there's a lot of scope here to develop something that is suitable to the needs of the labour force here. There's an awful lot of potential. So people, of course, just don't work from home. Sometimes individuals have 2 jobs. They would frequently get in touch with us whenever things get complicated for them, because the rules state that workers will only ever be liable to pay social insurance contributions in one place at a time. They'll never pay into 2 pots, and 2 pots will never look after them. It's one place that will be responsible. So in this wee tiny case, John lives in Derry. He works in Derry 2 days a week, and he works in Letterkenny 3 days a week. So you'd imagine, because of that 3 days in Derry, in Letterkenny, that it will be the south that will be most responsible for him. but not at all. It's more than 25% of his time is spent working in the jurisdiction where he lives. So it's actually the Northern Ireland that's responsible for this individual. So that's not really clear and obvious, you know, unless you know the rules and regulations, that wouldn't jump out at you. So there are workers and there are employers who are completely unaware of this. And I know that there are advisors on the call this morning that have had cases where individuals have been paying into two pots, and upon retirement time, for example, thinking that they're going to be fully entitled to pensions in both places. And that's not going to be the case. One set of contributions will have been no value to them whatsoever, and they're just discounted. But again, this is something maybe that we can talk about in the discussion time. So just to be aware that employment in both jurisdictions is another area that we need to raise some awareness of between workers, the employers, and also the advice sector who is supplying them with support or trying to. Because in all of this, as you can imagine, with all of those challenges and the need for information, I mentioned that information failure was one of the main overarching concerns found within the LEEF study. And that's certainly something that we would say as well within our Border People project and any of the engagement that we have had with the advice sector. Finding the information that is exactly tailored and suitable to the cross-border situation is very, very difficult if it exists at all. Sometimes frontier workers and cross-border workers are attached on to maybe a set of guidelines or some rules and regulations that are really more suitable to migrant workers. But a migrant worker, of course, has moved residence to another country to live and work in the same place. So a migrant worker and a cross-border worker are two very, very different things. So we can't lump them together. So as part of the LEEF study, we conducted quite a large survey of, I think it was over 400 or 440 individuals came back to us in the survey to share their experiences of working across the border. And we wanted to capture some of the opportunities and the challenges that they encountered. What was their motivation for going across the border? But one of the main things we wanted to find out about was their level of awareness of the challenges. Did they just see a cross-border job and go and take that opportunity and then worry about the consequences afterwards? Did they, what kind of pitfalls or potholes did they fall into after it was too late almost? So the survey identified that 65% of the individuals who responded to that survey had absolutely no awareness of social security, of implications of cross-border income on loans and mortgages, very little awareness of any kind of healthcare and of the need for cross-border taxation of to declare their income back at home. So a staggering amount, a lack of awareness was captured. And I suppose I'm saying staggering, but it really wasn't too much of a surprise, unfortunately. So the individuals who had some awareness, where did they find the information? Well, 98% of them said that they did not have sufficient access to clear and concise information from government sources. So there was not tailored information to the cross-border scenario. Now, maybe there was and they couldn't find it, but it certainly didn't jump out at them. And during the study and the research that we carried out, we found very, very little information. Which is unfortunate, but it's a very easy fix. You know, we put our heads together, we could quickly get the information out there that people need to know, because we don't want people losing opportunities for a good job across the border because they don't have access to cross-border information. So some of the information that we provide in the centre then is on the back of our cross-border website then, borderpeople.ie or borderpeople.info as well. You find it in both of those links. So there's a certain amount of information on that site. It's a very unwieldy site, but there's a staggering amount of information behind it. And a lot of the information in there has been captured by the advice sectors, North and South. We have kept over the years, and we've built very, very strong connections with the advice centres, North and South. The information sector, the Citizens Information Services on the southern side of the border, you'll find those on citizensinformation.ie, and then also the community advice organisations. You'll find links to them on the Advice NI. You'll find full network information on the Advice NI website. But really what we have found that behind the scenes, even with information, individuals need a lot of time, they need individual care and support. They need guidance to figure out how the information that is complicated applies to their exact situation. Whenever they do go to their local advice service, that advice sector or information provider, those individuals also need support from their colleagues across the border to figure out the cross-border bits, because they don't have resources available to them from other places on how to deal with these cross-border cases. The amount of collaboration that goes on behind the scenes in these organisations is fantastic. It will warm your heart to see the amount of collaboration and cooperation that takes place behind the scenes and doesn't get shouted about. So I have to congratulate those individuals that regularly share their information across the jurisdiction, because it's the only way that we can figure out some of these really complicated cases. Now, I have just shared a lot of information with you, and I'm really, really keen to get into the discussion bit. But before we move into that, I just want to let you know that this is actually the third in a series of webinars that's touching on the topics that we looked at in the LEEF report. So the next one is going to take place on the 24th of June, and you'll get full details and links available on that webinar on the Centre's website, crossborder.ie. Another date for your diary, may be of interest to you, is the 18th of September. The Centre has an annual conference that is very much focused at policymakers, decision makers, and leaders in the community and voluntary sector as well. It has an annual conference every single year, and this year we're going back to Dundalk. And this year it's going to spotlight the all-island labour market. We're going to really drill down on the challenges and opportunities, because there's a real appetite for change here at the moment, and that might be something of interest to you. So if you just mark the 18th of September in your diary too, and you get full information of the conference on the website, crossborder.ie. So just before we move into the discussion period now, we will stop the recording, Lisa,